So the reason why I do it through YouTube, not only is it easier to access, like if you guys have like a smart TV that has YouTube on it, you could watch it on that if you like. You could show me off to your friends and be like, "Hey, this is my teacher. He's on YouTube." Um, but also, it's a lot cleaner to look at. Uh, with Google Meets, it's really low quality. But what I can do is I can try to upload the stuff to Canvas. But that means that I'm going to have videos in two different spots, and I don't want to not transfer videos from YouTube into Canvas because I might miss one. So it automatically gets sent to YouTube. Does that make sense? It just simplifies the what I can do is I can add the links to the video. How about that? Would that work? Okay, cool. All right. So this is our problem. It says if a car starts with a velocity of 4 meters per second, travels over a distance or travels over a period of 463 seconds with an acceleration of 2 meters per second squared, what would the final velocity be? And then round to the nearest whole number. So we've already found the final velocity is what we're actually like. That's the objective of the problem. So my first known that the problem gives me is what, Destiny? Well, don't watch TV. I'm trying to give you all of my attention. So if you can give me all of your attention just for a little bit, cool? Okay. So my question was, in this problem, what's the first known that they give me? So if a car starts with a velocity of 4 meters per second, good. So we have 4 meters per second. All right. Now, so we have 4 meters per second. That's the value. But I don't know what variable that's going to represent. So we already know that we're trying to find the final velocity. So this is what we're looking for. And if I look at the units, I've got meters per second and meters per second. And this is 4 meters per second. So the only other variable that it can be, because this is meters per second squared, and that's seconds. So what variable would go right here out of these five? Excuse me. Are you paying attention, Destiny? Okay. So so since this is meters per second, and I'm trying to find final velocity, which has units of meters per second, the only other variable that has units of meters per second would be initial velocity. Does that make sense? And we can also see that it starts with a velocity of 4 meters per second. So another word for starting is initializing, or the initial state, or the initial velocity. So the initial velocity, or it's starting with a velocity of 4 meters per second. Cool with that? So this variable would be v sub I. Okay. Now, the next variable that we're given, or the next known that we're given, I continue on, it travels over a period of 463 seconds. So, which one of these variables has units of seconds? And actually, let me do this. I'm going to use some different colors. Yes. So it would be time. So we have time equals, and it was 463 seconds. Okay, is everybody tracking so far? Monte? Good. Sean, good. All right, cool. All right. So the next value that I have, next number that I have in my problem, it says an acceleration of 2 meters per second squared. Cool. So obviously, this one is going to be acceleration. And it was 2 meters over seconds squared. Okay. So is everybody tracking so far? It's pretty simple, right? All I've done is I've read through the problem, so I understand what's going on. I have a car that starts with a certain speed, it goes for a certain amount of time, and it's accelerating the entire time. And I want to know how fast is it going at the end of that time. That's my objective. So I'm given the starting velocity, I'm given the amount of time, and I'm given the acceleration. And I want to know how fast is it going after the 463 seconds. Cool. And all I've done is I've kind of just sorted these. I've put what my objective is. I need to find the final velocity, and then these three values were given in the problem, and all I did was I associated those with variables. Okay, so that's all I've done so far. So I'm hoping that that's clear. Okay, so since I'm trying to find my final velocity, and I'm given initial velocity, I'm given time, and I'm given acceleration, I do not know anything about the distance. So it doesn't mention anything about the distance in this problem. Okay, so any equation that pops up that has d in that equation, I cannot solve it because I don't have any value for d. Does that make sense? So the next step, I need to find an equation because I've already solved these things algebraically for you. I want an equation that starts with v sub f. Okay? And these equations here are on the announcement. Okay? It's on the page with the announcement. So I want to circle all of the equations that start with v sub f. So I look over here. Any v sub f's? No. Okay? I apologize for the bird. All right. I go to the next column. Is there a v sub f one? Yep. Here we go. Here's v sub f. I go to the next column. There's the v sub f right here. Circle that. And then look at the last column, and here's the v sub f here. Does everybody understand what I did there? All I've done is I've taken the 4, 6, 4, 8, 12, 16. So out of these 16 equations, I've knocked them down to 3 in one step. Make sense? Now, out of those 3, I can cut it down even more by doing this. So I can only have v sub I, t, and a on the right side of that equation. Okay, so anything that has v sub I, a, or t and a, those are the only things that can be over there. If I have an equation that has d, like I mentioned before, we can't solve it because we don't know anything about d. So what you can do to help your life, like to make this whole thing easier, is to go back and look at these equations, and any of the equations that have d, I can immediately cancel those out. So look at this first one here, and I've got d right there. So this one's gone. Can't use that one. This one looks promising, so we're going to hold on to that for now. And then I'm going to check this one. Oh, there's a d right there. I get rid of that. So it looks like out of all 16 of these equations, the only one that looks like it'll fit is this one. V sub f is equal to v sub I plus a times t. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to write that down. So v sub f equals v sub I plus a times t. All right. Now, in order to make sure that this is indeed the correct equation, what I have to do is I have to verify that what's on the left side is my find. All right. Is that my find? Sure enough, it is. All right. So I get a check mark for that. On the right side, I want to make sure that v sub I, a, and t, all the variables that are on the right side of this equation, they have to be located in my knowns box. If I have a variable that's over here that's not in my knowns box, I cannot solve the problem. So, do I have v sub I? Yes, I do. Do I have t? Yep. And do I have a? Yes. So I get check marks on both sides of the equation. This equation will work. So anywhere that I've got a variable, I'm going to put parentheses in place of those. So the v sub I, instead of writing v sub I put open or empty parentheses. It's just a little placeholder just to make sure that I don't mess anything up when it comes to the addition or the multiplication or the squares or the square roots. I want to make sure that it looks exactly the same as the step before. Cool? Now, this is the easy part. All I have to do is plug in the value for v sub I, which is 4. The value for a, I've got 2. And the value for time, I get 463. And now, it's as simple as plugging into the calculator. So I'm going to do the multiplication first. So the 2 times 463, and I get 926 plus 4. I get what? $930. And this is a velocity, so it's going to have units of meters over seconds. That's the final velocity. Now, when you plug this into the actual problem, like to submit your answer, notice that the answer is 930, but there's no units. Okay, I just want the number. Now, in this case, I didn't have to round anything, so we got lucky. Cool. Does anybody have any questions? Destiny, are you paying attention? Are you watching your stories? So when it comes to, I can't remember what's the phrase for the order of operations? Can't remember what it's called. So what I would recommend, Destiny, is if you go to Desmos, and you plug it in just like this. So if you go to desmos.com and you plugged in 4 plus 2 times 463, it'll do it for you. Okay. Desmos is definitely your friend. Okay. So your issue was you didn't know which equation to use for each problem. Okay. So is that where the hiccup was? Is that where you were having issues? Okay. So is that part clear? Does it make sense now? Okay. So that being said, I keep saying that. I mentioned this last time, last class. I keep saying that being said. I've said it like 30 times today. I need to stop saying that. So how many people have actually paid attention today and it actually makes sense today? Like, be honest. So, Sean, it makes sense to you. Okay. Monte, what about you, man? Monte. Okay. All right. So, hallway? Who's in the hallway? Half. Halfway? Okay. So, what part of this, Monte, did you not catch? Like, what part of this did you not understand? Like, I want you to be, like, completely brutally honest. Like, it's not that, like, you're not going to sound dumb. It's not any kind of, like, indication of your intelligence. It could probably, it's most likely something that I can easily answer, and then it will finally click for you. So, what part did you get confused? So, the first step was I wrote down what I need to find. Was that part confusing? So, writing down what I needed to find. Is that part good? After that, okay. So, were you confused about when I wrote down what I knew? You understand how to get the knowns from the actual problem? Yes, no? Okay. So, after that, do you understand this part? Where I need to have an equation that starts with what I need to find and then can only have stuff that's on the right side that are in my knowns box. You understand that part? Because if I have any other variable over here that is not in my knowns, that's a value that I don't have a number for, so therefore I can't plug it in and I can't get an actual number for that. Does that part make sense? Okay. Now, so what I did over here was kind of an another way to help you figure out which equation to use. So I know that I need to find my final velocity. I'm given my initial, my acceleration, my time, and I do not know anything about distance. Do you agree with that? So any equation that has distance in it, I'm not able to solve and get a number for final velocity. Okay. So the very first step that I did when it came to trying to find the proper equation. Oh, you guys can't see what I'm writing. I apologize. So what I was saying was I know that I need to find the final velocity. I'm given the initial, the acceleration, and the time, but I do not know anything about the displacement. So any equation that has displacement in it, I cannot use. So in order to cut all of these equations, like I need to edit this and get rid of this guy. But you know what I mean. So I've got a total of 16 equations out of all that. Now, what these come from are just the four kinematic equations, but I solved them algebraically for each of the variables. Okay. So these are all the same equation. They're just solved algebraically for each of the variables. That's all it is. Same thing with this column and the other two. Okay, they're all the same equation. So I've got one, two, three, four equations, but they're just solved differently for the different variables. So you guys don't have to do any algebra. That's all this is. Okay. So I know this looks intimidating. It's a whole bunch of letters and weird squares and square roots, but hopefully by explaining what they are and where they came from, that helps you guys. Okay, so in order to help thin all those equations out, what I have to do is I have to find an equation. Since I've already solved them algebraically for you, I want an equation that starts with v sub f. So all I do is I go through each column and I look for v sub f. Do I see v sub f over here? No. There's no v sub f in those. Looked on these ones. Oh, here's v sub f. So I'm going to circle this one for now. And then I go to the next column. Is there a v sub f? Yep, there's a v sub f there. Next column, and v sub f there. So there's only 3 equations now. Instead of 16, I now only have 3. And that's just by finding the ones that are already solved for final velocity. You tracking so far, Monte? Okay. Now, to thin it out even more, instead of looking for ones that have v sub I, t, and a, it'll be a lot easier to look for an equation that has something that I can't use. Okay? So that's when I look for ones that do not have, or sorry, I stand correct. I want to find equations that have d in it, so then I can cancel them out. Because I know that if it has d in there, I can't solve it. So it's no use to me. So I look at the equations, I look at this first one here, and I go through and I'm like, la, 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 oh, there's a d, and this one's gone. Cool. I look at this second one. There's no d in it, so far that one looks okay. And then I look at this last one down here, look at it, oh, there's a d right there, and I get rid of that. So the only possible one that I've got so far that could potentially work, I'll say potentially because we haven't confirmed it yet, is this one. So what I do is I come down and I write the equation. Now, to make sure that this is the right one, what I have to do is I make sure that on the left side of the equation, this should be my find. Is that? Yep. So v sub f, that's my find. So I get a check mark. So that's good to go. So it's solved for the correct variable. Now, I look at the right side of the equal sign, and I should only have v sub I, a, and t. These ones should all be in my knowns box. If these are not in my knowns box, if I have a variable over here that's not located in my knowns category, then I somehow chose the wrong one. Okay? But v sub I, a, and t are the variables that are on this side. V sub I, a, and t. Cool. So this is the proper equation. This one here. And wherever I have a variable, I'm going to put parentheses. So this parentheses, that's parentheses, and so on. And then I just take out the variable and I substitute in what the number is that's associated with that variable. So v sub I is equal to 4, right here. A is equal to 2, right there. And then time is equal to 463 time 463. Any confusion so far, Monte? Is that good? Okay. So what Destiny asked before, she asked, like, do we always multiply first? And I didn't directly answer that question because I don't want, like, if there's a square or if there's a square root, then it would not be the case. But what I recommend is putting this into Desmos. So it looks like that. So 4 plus 2 times 463. If you put this into Desmos, it'll do the order of operations properly. Okay, so you don't have to worry about it. So I just did an intermediate step here. So this isn't not it's not necessary. Um, but if you're doing this by hand and not using Desmos, you in this particular situation, you would do the multiplication first and then you would add. Okay, that's part of the order of operations. And then you just plug it in the calculator and then you get your answer. Okay. So Monte, how do you feel now? From 0 being I have no idea what I'm doing to 10 being I got this. How would you rank it? Like with this problem here. Note that I'm not asking like how confident do you feel like you could do it on your own? I'm asking with your comprehension of this particular problem. 0 being I have no idea what's going on, 10 being I understand this problem in particular 100%. Okay. So, more importantly, do you understand the process of what I did? I read the problem. I wrote down what I need to find, wrote down my knowns. I kind of put like a temporary, like a pseudo format of what the equation should look like. So basically, what I'm saying is on the left side, I should have v sub f, and on the right side, I should have some sort of combination of these three variables. And that's indeed what we got here. So that's all this red part is just kind of like a guidance for what it should look like. So if you understand the process, every single problem that's on this assignment is done the exact same way. The problems will be different, but the process is literally the exact same. The steps that I just took, if you copied those steps on each of the problems, you would get 100%. Does that make sense? Okay. Destiny, how are you feeling? Destiny's watching her stories again. Oh, there we go. Number 2. All right. So one of the things that I did was I had the problems change order. So Destiny, what is your question state? Like what is your how does it start? If you could unmute and let me know, that might be quicker because we're getting close to time. Yeah. So the problem number is gonna be different. So if you could start reading out the problem real quick, so I can figure out which one it is. Can you read it out to me? That might be quicker. What's the first word? What would this one? What would the initial velocity of a car have to be if it reaches a velocity of blah 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 in blah blah blah? Well, yeah, so the numbers are going to be different, but the rest of it should be the same. What would the initial velocity of a car have to be if it reaches a velocity? Like the numbers are different for every person. But does the rest of the problem look the same while also having an acceleration of, and then it'll be a different number? Okay, so what about this one? What would the initial velocity of a car have to be if it was able to reach a velocity of? What would the final velocity of a car be? That one. So the numbers on the questions, like the knowns, these values, they do change every time. So like if you go in and redo, like once you submit it, it will change the numbers, but the problem would be the same. So just for an example, with this problem here, this process like this. So if we were dealing with that first problem where I forgot what the actual question was, but that question will use this equation. The only difference is that these numbers will be different. Does that make sense? So as long as you write down like what the problem is and you figure out what the proper equation is, all you have to do is plug in the new numbers and then you're already done with the problem. All right. So it wasn't, was it this one, Destiny? Not that one. What would the initial velocity be? So just to barely reach a height. Do you want to share your screen? That way I can see what it is. Do you know how to share your screen? Ended up going. Yeah, area. Is that it? Yep. All right, cool. I found it. Wait, what? How do you have. That's weird. Oh, you're showing my screen. I was like, wait a minute, hold on. What's going on? Okay. All right. Huh, what do I do? Are you sharing right now? There we go. Okay. That's better. All right. So the one that I've got on the screen now, that's the one that you're got issues with. Correct. Okay, cool. All right. Let me pin the screen. All right. So, if you guys are understanding this, you are free to go. Um, make sure that you understand that this is going to be due tonight at midnight. So please make sure you take the time to do it. There is going to be two grades, 20 points just to complete it, and 40 points for accuracy. All right. So please do not take an L on it. Yes, Benicia? What's up? Hold on, I can't hear you. Nah, I can hear a lot of like moving around. Is it? Are you on your phone? I can hear you a little bit. It's very faint. Ask your question again. 50 instead of one half. Uh, you mean point 0.5? Yeah, point. Yeah, 50 would definitely be different. Yeah, you can do point 0.5 instead of one half. Yeah. All right. So, Destiny on this problem. So it's asking what would the initial velocity of a car have to be? So what are we asked to find? Destiny, still in here? Yeah. So you can see my screen, right? Okay. So it says what would the initial velocity of a car have to be? All right. So what is it asking us to find? Good. Initial velocity. So v sub I, and that's gonna be meters over seconds. All right. And then it says if it ended up going 78 meters per second. So if I'm already trying to find initial velocity, there's only one more velocity that's available. Oh, you can't see what I'm doing. There's only one more velocity that's available, and that would be my final velocity. So if it ended up going 78 meters per second, that's my final velocity. You cool with that? Then it says it accelerated with a value of -1 meters per second squared. So in my problem, it says the acceleration is going to be -1 meters over seconds squared. And then it says over a distance. Oh, she keeps coming in and out. Is she back in? Okay. You keep dropping in and out. Okay. And it says over a distance of 697 meters. So that's going to be distance equals 697 meters. All right. So I have to find initial velocity. I know my final. I know my acceleration, and I know the distance. Cool. So I need to find how fast it needs to be going. Okay, so you did yours like that. Good. Good. I know the displacement, I know the acceleration, and I don't know the time. All right. Now I want an equation that starts with v sub I and has some sort of combination of v sub f, a, and d. And any equation that has time, I want to mark out. So let's start off with looking at the ones that start with v sub I. So here's v sub I, here's v sub I, here's v sub I, and here's v sub I. So now out of the 16, I only have 4 that I'm looking at. Now, any of them that have time in it, I want to cross out because I don't know anything about time. So look at this first one here. Is there time? Yep. So this one's gone. Let's go to the next one. So there's no time in this one. So that one looks good so far. So I'm going to put a little star there. Let's look at this one. Oh, there's time. So that's gone. And then the last one, there's time right there. So that one's gone. So this would be the equation that you need. So I'm going to write that down here. So v sub f squared plus 2 times a times b I. And just to make sure I did it right. Yep. Okay. Whoop. Minus, not plus. Okay. So did you get this equation? V sub I equals, say it again? A plus D? Which equation is that? Well, I mean, I don't see one that says A plus D. Like, this is... A plus D. I don't see an A plus D. So where did you get the A plus D, though? Did you get it from the sheet? Oh, do you not have access to the sheet? Okay, so getting the knowns and the finds, this part will be the same. Cool. But when it comes to like up until this point, like whatever the find is needs to go over here, and then some sort of open this up. So this needs to be over here. So some sort of combination of whatever's in the knowns. So up until this point, it's going to be almost identical to the previous problem. Where it starts to differ is the actual equation that we're using. Okay. So we ended up finding that this is the equation that we need because all the other v sub I equations, this one, that's way too thick. This one here, this one here, and this one here that are all solved for v sub I, all of these have t in them, and I don't know anything about t, so I can't solve those equations. Does that make sense? Because I don't have a number for time. Okay. So if you're cool with like you understand that this is the right equation, right? That's the right one to use? Okay. So if you're cool with that, let's do this. Okay, so that's my equation. And anywhere that I've got a variable, I'm going to put open, like empty parentheses. Like this. And then let me give me 1 second. I'm going to Desmos. Just to kind of show you what I mean. So you know how to use Desmos, right? Okay. So I would definitely recommend doing that. Okay. The reason why is because it's a scientific calculator and it's a lot better than the phone. Okay. Do you have an iPhone? Well, I don't know that. I'm just asking. So how often are you using the calculator on your iPhone to do these problems? Okay. All right. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna plug in the numbers. Okay, so my final velocity was 78. Cool. My acceleration was -1, and my distance was 697. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this. So it'll be 78 squared, 2 times -1 times 697. Okay, so all I did was I made it all in black. You agree that this equation is the same thing as that, right? Yeah, meters per second squared. Just a -1. Yeah. So the reason why I've got these the units here is to help you guys figure out um what variable they link up with. So like with meter, the one that has meter is distance. So that's why I put the units in there. Does that make sense? And then meters per second squared, the only one that has meters per second squared is right here, and that's acceleration. So it's to help you to figure out what variable those numbers go with. Cool. Okay, good. Now, when it comes to this, all right, so what I want you to do is I want you to like are you writing any of this down? Okay. So I want you to write this out just like it is, like with the parentheses and everything. Let me know when you're done with that. Just just this number right here. Like I just want you to write this down real quick. Um just so you can look at that and then what I'm going to be typing in a second. Okay. Um so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to Desmos. Okay. Now, all you have to do is go to desmos.com, and then if you go to show keypad, what's that? Where's the scientific? I just saw it. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So first off, I have a square root. So the square root's going to be down here. So notice I have a square root. And then I'm going to have open parentheses, 78. And then I'm going to hit the right arrow. And I'll put close parentheses. You cool with that so far? All right. And then this little A with the 2 there, that's going to put a square. So it's matching up so far. And then I'm going to put a minus. And then I'm going to put a 2. And just to make sure everything looks exactly the same, I'm going to do times, open parentheses. I'm going to do, where's the next? I guess if I do a -1, yep, like that. Close parentheses, times, open parentheses, 6, 9, 7. Then I close parentheses. Yeah, so if I look back at the problem, yeah, So round to the nearest whole number, so 86. And if I look at this, it's 86.475. So this would round down. Cool. All right, go ahead. You're good, Migo. All right, so Destiny, does it make sense now with Desmos? So if you make sure that this equation right here looks just like what you have as your equation, like this, if you make sure that they look exactly the same, then you're going to get the question correct. Okay? So, how much better do you feel after this? Okay. And I think I have some wiggle room with the questions, so I've got some margin of error built in. I mean, even if you round incorrectly, I can go back and give you the points if you're like, hey, I accidentally rounded up versus rounding down, and I got it wrong, but you got the rest of the problem correct. I'll give you credit for that. I'll just have to go in and change the value. All right, sounds good. All right, everybody else good? The four of you that are in here. All right. So I'm going to end the live stream.